when you realize what we talked about earlier, that losing weight and just focusing on your diet is not the full picture, then all that stuff comes to the surface of mental health, mindset, low self-esteem, never feeling good enough, all these things that you're like, oh, all this stuff's like really important, and dare I say more important, So I think we've all kind of realized that as we've gone through our journeys.
It's kind of like dissecting, how did we get into the situation where we needed a keto diet to begin with?
Yeah.
You want to go back. So did you have trauma in your childhood? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Yeah, so I had kind of an interesting childhood. My parents were divorced when I was in the second grade, and it was a very nasty divorce. And we were definitely in the cross arrows of like them talking bad about each other, going back and forth every weekend between each other's the houses. And then my mom deals with some like mental illness and panic disorder. And so she was going through a lot of different things at the time. So we ended up moving in with my dad, and my dad was taking care of us full time, and he didn't have any money, and he was just making it as best as he could. So we lived in like breezeways of people's houses and garages that were converted into apartments, and like we were definitely struggling a lot. And I think just like never really feeling settled, and lots of conflict in our families. We were always in counseling as kids, just, going back and forth. My mom always put us in counseling. So we were, I just feel like from the beginning, we were constantly struggling with like that self-worth. Is this my fault? Things like that. And then as I got older, I had like some more kind of traumatic things happen in our family. And I just felt like it was always something. There was never like this settled foundation feeling.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And you know about my story, getting beat as a teenager, and then it just sends you in a tailspin. Like I tell people, trauma begets more trauma begets more trauma until you can somehow break that cycle. What broke the cycle?
I feel like in general, when I had Olivia, I realized that I needed to get healthy on multiple levels because I didn't want to repeat the cycle.
Olivia.
What's that?
Olivia is your daughter.
Yeah, sorry. I'm like assuming.
Talking to me, but you're talking to everybody. Olivia's her daughter. How old is she now?
She just turned 8.
8 years old.
8 years old. So, I think that like having her definitely put things into perspective for me. And I wanted to be a good example for her, and I wanted to be around for her. And then I didn't want to repeat that cycle of everything that I felt and like the things that were put into my head. And one of the things that I really noticed is, and I don't know if other people feel this way, but when I really look back at like the generation of women in my family, my grandmother was a model, and she was like very much into like aesthetics, and everything was about the way she looked. And when she raised my mom, she was very critical of my mom and her looks, and everything was very focused on that. And I remember growing up, like, it's kind of like it makes its way down through the generations. And I remember even my grandmother saying to me after I got married to Mick, like, make sure you like do your hair and your makeup, and make sure like you have everything nice and neat and stuff when Mick gets home from work. And it's just crazy to me to look back and see how much of an emphasis our physical selves was like big then. It was like, that's how you got a husband. That's how you, maintain this look of like you were doing better than your neighbors. And like, I can kind of see that it got passed down little by little, because my mom is like insanely critical of herself. I mean, I've literally gone to dressing rooms with her and heard her look in the mirror and say, oh God, like I look disgusting in this, and when we're describing ourselves like that, and when you're young and you grow up, you learn like, you look in the mirror and you're critical, and you see that passed down. So I really had this mission with raising Olivia not to be critical. And it's hard because so many of us, our inner voice is so critical and so negative, and we're always looking for something to try to dial in,
Well, and for you got it hardwired from your own mom. This is what you woman. This is the expectation you should have on yourself as a woman. I'm talking to a friend right now, and she's the exact same way. She's got a 10-year-old girl, and she's just, I gained 15 pounds, and oh my God, it's so ugly. Oh, and I'm on video. I do have a double chin. I'm just like, what? Like, you get deep into the crevice of why you believe these kind of things, and you kind of go, why do I believe those things? Like, you recognize bad pattern in your mom, and you're trying to do better for your daughter, even though it still hurts. You're still like fighting that. Oh my gosh, I want to say something bad about Suzanne, but you can't, because you have a bigger picture with this little one. But this one, she also has a little one about the same age as and she fights it all the time. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is interesting when you can really come face to face with seeing, like, we're only like 2 or 3 generations off from a lot of women's like value and purpose being centered around like how they looked. Like, I mean, that was literally the core, like that was what my grandmother was so obsessed with, that because that was like how she got like a certain husband. And like, you know, I mean, even when you watch like these older shows of how people were, you know, it's like, how do you look and what does your dress look like and how tight is your corset? So it's like there's all these generational patterns that we're having to overcome. And you hope that generation by generation, you just continue to get better. But then the other beautiful thing that comes from that is you're able to look back, and instead of resenting my mom for that, I actually feel empathy and compassion for her. That, like, God, can you imagine what she went through growing up? Like having a super, super critical mom. Like, at least she was aware, raising me, of like, I had this critical thing, but maybe she was a little bit better than what her mom was to her. So like, it gives you that great perspective to look back with empathy instead of being like the victim of everything.
I had to do the same thing with my dad, because I never understood why he was so abusive to me physically and emotionally until I found I had an alcoholic father that drank alcohol and was emotionally and physically abusive to him. So when my came on the scene in my life and had kids, he's like, oh, I'm going to be better than my dad. I don't drink alcohol. I'm a police officer. I'm an upstanding member of the business community. Da, 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 da. So in his mind, he did better. And I suppose it's the difference between filtered cigarettes and unfiltered cigarettes. They're both bad, but he was the filtered, that it was a little bit better. So therefore it was good.
Yeah. I think that's all we can hope, is that like with each generation, we get more aware and more open. And what I really love now is that like we all are starting to really normalize mental health, seeking help. Everyone, men, women, like being strong is being vulnerable. It's not trying to act like everything's fine. It's not the whole term of like man up. It's like, let's talk about the things that are bothering you. Let's talk about, you know, how you feel about things, what happened in your past. Like, being vulnerable is being strong. And I think having that shift is going to open up so much healing for so many people.
Oh, but so many people, Suzanne, still resist it because it's so comfortable to stay where you are, stay in your misery, stay in the lemmingness of the world. I'm tired of being a world. I want to be that shining shooting star that makes changes happen. And you and I both have. You and I both have books and influence people. We get emails every single day. Oh my God, you changed my life. And so it's amazing when you get that. But other people, they're just like, they're not willing to put in that work that will make themselves vulnerable, make themselves maybe a sitting duck for potential criticism, that it keeps them stuck in their muckety muck. And then their whole life they wonder, why didn't I ever do anything? Why didn't I ever go anywhere? Why didn't any things ever happen? You gotta break loose those shackles that have held you down.
Yeah, I mean, being vulnerable is scary. That's why it is easy, like you said. It's easier to sit on the sidelines and just like tear other people apart, or to stay stuck in what you are. But I think the complex thing is, I think you and I can both, we've been through this, is like when you're in it, it feels like that's the more comfortable space, but it's actually not. Like, it's actually, when I look back now and I think, man, what I thought was my comfort zone, I was miserable. Like, I was absolutely miserable. So it's like the uncomfortable comfort spot. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not really living. Like, living is when you can really be who you are, show up and say like, hey, this is me, you know, and I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to show up and I'm going to do things that I care about. And I think if you put that foot forward, that's the best to be.
I remember when I got out of college, I always felt like every job I was in, I was destined to do more. It was just that pull within. What I now know, spirit was trying to like scream, dude, go do your own thing. But I always felt like I had so much more to give, but they couldn't see it. It was like, hello, like, hello, like, and I couldn't get anybody's attention. And I knew my own value even at that point, even as other people didn't. And so that's what made me take the plunge eventually to go out on my own 16, 17 years ago to just give this a go. And I'm glad I did, by the way. So if you're ever like on that edge and you feel that heart's pull, you guys go, like, take that plunge. That had to be scary for you when you decided to go full time, and then your husband also joined your business, and that had to be kind of scary. Oh my gosh, we're doing all this on our own now. Are we going to do this? And so how was it like for?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has like its highs and lows, and I think ultimately I struggled for a long time with looking at anything in the keto space as being like more business related, because for me, it was like such a passionate topic, and I just wanted to like so badly to help people. And I wasn't thinking about any like business motives at all. So when you actually do have to make this shift of like, I hit this crossroads of, I was an ultrasound tech before I do what I do now. So it's like, I either need to like go back and be an ultrasound tech and have that be my career, and I'm not going to have time to do all the things that I love doing in this space, or I can do this, monetize in an ethical way, keep doing these things that I love and really make an impact that like to me really it fills my cup. Like I really feel like I'm making a difference. So I had to kind of overcome these like little judgments that I had built in that I didn't even know where they came from. I don't know. I'm still kind of unpacking all of that, but I think it was just that like I hated so much the idea of like the weight loss industry. And so I kind of wanted to form something that was like the anti-weight loss industry, of empowering people to know that they don't need to be reliant on products or programs or like all of these things that we're bought and sold all the time. And we're always looking for something outside of ourselves to fix whatever it is we're struggling with. So, moving over to that was definitely scary. But again, I think this is like one of the most important things is I think sometimes people look at fear as a response of this means that I shouldn't do something, but that's actually not true. That's like, hey, this is a normal part of entrepreneurship, of doing something that's new. It's going to be scary when you're making your own path, but that's not proof that you shouldn't do it. In fact, it's proof that you should.
I often tell the story about 2009. It was right after the market kind of went crazy in 2008, and we were really depressed kind of economy at that point. All the sponsors that used to send me money went away. They like, nope, we don't know what's going on. Kind of like right now, a lot of the sponsors are like, yeah, we don't know what we're doing. So I didn't make any money, and I didn't have books at the time. So I didn't make any money for about 9 or 10 months in a row. And it got to the point where, okay, this passion project was fun while it lasted. I did okay, but I guess I'm going to have to shut it down. I said, but before I do, let me strip everything down to the bare nakedness. So cut off cell phones, cut off cable, basically existed on eggs, like everything. Because I was like, I'm not letting this die without a fight.
Right.
And 1 year of that, they started coming back, and I started making money again and be able to pay my bills. And then 2 years later, I get a call from the publisher, hey, you want to write books? And then became a huge bestseller. So I tell people you should be thankful I didn't give up in 2009, because there would have been no Keto Clarity. There would have been no Keto Talk. There would have been this podcast would have ended because I wouldn't have had time to do it. It's so funny, like when you look back in those moments, then when things could have just like crashed and burned, and then you look at where you are today and go, oh, thank God I persevered.
Yeah, I mean, almost every like big success story, both in people and companies that I really resonate with, there's like always this common thread when they're really vulnerable and they're talking about the process of a moment where it almost all ended, or a moment where they almost didn't do this big pivotal thing, and then they did, and it changed the entire outcome. So I think that's just kind of an interesting thing. Ryan Lowry actually said to me the other day something that like really resonated with me about you learn more from being like on the bottom than you do from the mountaintops. And I think, I don't know exactly how he worded it, but it's so true. It's like when you really hit that rock bottom, it really kind of gives you in this really interesting place of like, what really matters? Like, what's my purpose? Like, what do I care the most about?